Hi everyone, it's a pleasure to be here today. My name is Lisa Petrilli and I'm the Chief Operating and Marketing Officer for the To Be a Woman Global Platform. It's my pleasure today to be here with Dr. Gerald Durley. He is a renowned civil rights and human rights leader and the former pastor of the Providence Missionary Baptist Church here in Atlanta. His accomplishments are phenomenal, and he is a very special guest to us today. He is in the book, To Be a Woman, our signature book. And Dr. Durley, I wanted to ask you a little bit about what it was like when you were first reading the book, what your experience was like in doing that.
I believe there are times in all of our lives where you sit down and you're cordial to somebody. Vonda, a very special person, when I met her, she said, I'd like you to read the book. And you acquiesce because particularly when you're a busy person, here in Atlanta I'm on 16 or 17 boards, so I'm busy. But I was being nice and polite. So I opened it and I saw a picture of me, then a picture of the Buddhist priest. Those were minor, but then I began to read the essence of what it was. It was about how a woman can find the spiritual core from which she had her strength to be who she is supposed to be. And I read the first couple of pages, and then I started reading about the women. And at that point, I knew that there was something very special about the writing, about to be a woman and what it meant. I came up in an era to be a woman meant you had to outdo men. But you don't have to outdo men to be a woman. You can be a woman in the very essence of who you are. It's so powerful. And I said, what is this? And I continued to read, and it pricked my consciousness very much. So that was my introduction to this very powerful book. It is a book that my daughter, my grandchildren, I will be putting it, as you know, I'm a pastor here in Atlanta, I will be putting it into the hands of the women that have always been spoken down to, wondering could they make it. And the 31 essences by those women there is so powerful. So that was my initial impression to the book.
And it's interesting you talk about the women that you work with. Have you seen, what we see is that women do tend to suppress their feminine divine energy. And your thoughts about our work to raise that divine energy within women and then on the planet?
Well, I think, first of all, our culture and our society, particularly here in America, and maybe around the world, when you look at how they bind the feet of Chinese women, there is a myopic ignorance among cultures that do tend to suppress women. And you can only be suppressed when you feel you're suppressed. You can only become a slave when you feel you're enslaved. That's why I think the book To Be a Woman allows a woman to say, wait a minute, I may be in a culture that suppresses me, but I don't have to be suppressed. Everything starts with a thought, with an idea, and so now they can begin to believe that even though I'm in an oppressive society, I can survive and be a success. They told us as black Americans we would never be able to vote. We would always be slaves. We would always be second-class citizens. But once we begin to talk to people and begin to make people believe that we're all created in the image of an almighty God, that's what this book does, allows women to understand that your very presence, your very essence, your very being, your very personhood came from God, not from culture, not from society, and certainly not from men. So I think that once you get that clear and you begin to see it and begin to read it. When my wife and I read the book, I said, I think earlier, you can't read this book in 31 days. No. You might be on one essence for maybe 2 or 3 days if you're serious about a transformation in your life. And then when the light comes on, you move ahead. I read what the women said, that's fine. But then when I read what Vonda was writing behind it, and the key word, I think, is thought-provoking. When it becomes thought-provoking in your life, that means thoughts are things, and things can change your life. That's what this book means. That's what it means. And I'm not a promoter of books. I'm an old, war-torn civil rights, Martin King and all of us in before the Ku Klux Klan. But this has a special meaning for women of all colors, all races, all faiths. And I think that's what's important, that I think it has the meaning and the significance.
You mentioned when you were speaking that there were 4 women who really stood out to you at a time when the country was really challenged and you were working on civil rights and human rights. And what's interesting, I think, for me to hear that is that what we are so sure of in this book is that women and men need to understand that they are most powerful when they are in balance. we are most powerful as individuals when we are balanced in our masculine and feminine, both as women and as men. And our objective is not for women to think they need to be more powerful than men or to act like a man, but for all of us to be whole and divinely ourselves and then in balance with each other. Men in balance with women. How do you feel about that?
Well, there was Bella Abzug. She came out with a book years ago, and then the lady who was at this, forgotten her name, Gloria Steinem. When that whole women's movement came, it's one thing to say I'm a woman, and you can say I'm a woman without putting down a man. The difference, and I said this to Vonda, was that you can be a woman, your own strength can come without putting down a man. I came to a period in order for a woman to exert her femininity and power was to put down a man. My mother used to say, down not those who are down. Cheer them up in their sorrow. For this old world is a funny old world, and you may be down tomorrow. So when I look at the movement, when Andrew Young, when Joe Lowry, when John Lewis and C.T. Vivian were out there, and I was a young pup out there in the movement, we were fighting the causes, but the real strength behind these men were the women who were at home. Why? They had to raise the children. They had to give a perspective to the children. They had to, when the men came in, when Martin would come in, Coretta would sit down and look at him first and say, you can do it. And he would get the strength. It wasn't anything that he was doing in and of himself. And you taking care of the kids with Bernice and Yolanda and Dexter and Martin. And so the women. Now, isn't it interesting that in 2013, all 4 of the women who were the strength are dead? Evelyn Lowry just died a few weeks ago. Jean Young, Andy's wife. Lillian Lewis, John's wife, and Octavia Vivian. And the men are still here. But the reason that they're here in their 80s and their late 70s and early 90s is because of the power of the women. But when women abdicated that responsibility, no, I don't want to be that, I don't want to be that. Society says I've got to compete. It's not a matter of competing, it's a matter of cooperating. And when you understand the balance and the cooperation, then you have power, then you have strength, and then the family grows, and then you find peace in your home. That's what I think is so important. When I read the book, because I'm like most people, I say, oh, here's a well put together book, it's pretty, it's nice. But then when you get into the in-depth and you begin to read it, and so my wife and I, of all these years, we begin to answer those kinds of questions in our own lives, and it is so powerful. I'm going to tell you what's really key. It allows a woman, and I don't like to get into the gender, feminine, masculine thing, but it allows a woman to be who she is, who she was created to be, and not have to jump through the corporate hoops and be strong and run faster and jump longer and be smart and never face stress. It allows my feminine side to be real, but also it challenges a man to say, wow, I can appreciate that. Because we have a thing in the Christian tradition that says when you're married that you shall complement one another. That's compliment with an E, not with an I. So when you're strong and I'm weak, we complement each other. When I'm weak and you're strong, or vice versa. That's the beauty of us coming together.
Yes, absolutely. Being fully balanced within yourself.
Balance.
So you talked when you were speaking earlier about the rose. Can you say a few words about how the page and what Vonda wrote about the rose as our symbol of the To Be a Woman global platform, what that meant to you?
I believe it's page 152. And the reason that's important, I read through the ladies' stories and all of that. And I'm around a lot of people. I'm around a lot of places. I'm around a lot of countries. But when I began to read the rose, after the second paragraph, I had to stop. And I think if you're really to have anything that has any transformation in your life, you can't just say, I finished the book last night. That means nothing. But what did page 2 mean? And you might have to dwell on page 2. And I stopped and it said about the rose petal and the protectiveness. And we've got to protect and care. Yet the rose is still strong. And I turned to Vonda, I said, this is Muriel, my wife. And so I just had to keep reading in my own pace about the rose and about the rose, the rosary beads, and about the rose windows. And then to get down to that last paragraph. And she was crying. She wrote it. I think she did. But she wrote that. But it means so much. It transcends culture. It transcends race. It transcends faith, beliefs. It was the real essence, if I could use that term. You don't mind if I use essence. It's the essence of it. So that page, aside from all of the stories, I did. And I came home and I read that to my wife. And we just had to, like in your business, you have filming, we had to cut it off and just say, look, let's just stop for a minute. We can't, let's just stop. And we had to stop and just allow it to minister to us. And then I said, wow, Mira, that's you. Thank you for being, there's a song here in the States called You Are the Wind Beneath My Wings. Some of us don't realize that we soar because of the wind, but we miss what the wind really is. She and most women are the wind beneath, because the wind, pneuma, that's what we call it, pneuma, that's spirit, wind and spirit. So the spirit comes from that force that makes you a better person.
That's beautiful. Thank you so much. Thank you for being here today. Thank you for taking the time to talk and just being a part of this beautiful platform. I can't thank you enough.